Welcome to the Make Heaven Crowded podcast, a space where we dive deeper into Sunday's message and talk about how we can live out our faith in a world that's constantly changing. We'll unpack real-life topics, world events, and what it means to follow Jesus in everyday life. For more info or to get connected, go to teamfbc.info. Let's make heaven crowded.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for our Make Heaven Crowded podcast with Pastor Roger, Pastor Luke, Pastor Jordan. It's an opportunity to do a little bit of a deep dive on what we talked about last Sunday, but also to dive into some worldly topics that you may not hear from the pulpit, and yet everybody is talking about it. So we're going to keep up with the Joneses, and we're going to talk about what other people are talking about. So today, we are going over, we are now smack dab in the middle of our parable series, and Luke Winfrey got to give the message on the parable of the talents. Great parable about talents.
I thought you were complimenting my talent.
You have immense talent.
You did a great job.
You did a good. It was a good message, very applicable, practical to our culture. But we don't have a long time to preach. We certainly, there's always more that can be said, and so I do know that there was stuff that you didn't get to cover that you would have liked to. So
Well, real quick, leading up to the sermon, we had some conversations prior to in the office and things like that, and this parable is a very tough parable in regards to, as I think I said, it can hit people not just in the gut, but right between the eyes.
Yep.
And that I was curious how you were going to deliver that. And I thought you did a great job.
Yeah, well, thank you. This one was a fun one to dive into because I think for most people, and when they hear it preached, the conversation always just talks about money, and it leads to just about money and what are you doing with the money the Lord has entrusted with you and to you. And so if you did not watch on Sunday, you can find the parable in Matthew chapter 25. It is also found in Luke. What part of Luke is it?
You just
found
preached
in?
it.
I know, but
Come on.
Luke 19, 11 through 27. I preached it out of Matthew. And so it is one of those that's found in both Matthew and Luke. Luke, it's called the parable of the minas. Or is that how you say that, Jordan?
Yeah, that's how I call it.
Okay.
Parable of the 10 minas.
Parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through 30. And the whole context of the setting that is building up to this, it's the Tuesday of Jesus' last week on earth in the Matthew version. And it is just him and his disciples. They're sitting on the Mount of Olives overlooking Jerusalem. Jesus had just got done talking about the temple, overthrowing the temple. The temple was going to be destroyed. They just heard him preach in the temple and cleanse the temple of driving people out. And now the disciples have all these questions about, hey, what does this mean? What about the destruction of the temple? When are you coming back? And when is the sign of the end of the age? The thing is, and I think if we go back to Matthew chapter 24, when they first asked this question in 24:3 to Jesus, they are asking the question not knowing, because they have not grasped that Jesus was actually going to die. And when they're asking that question, if you look and you study at this point, the disciples do not understand Jesus is about to die on a cross and he's going to rise 3 days later. He has told them over and over. They have not grasped it yet. So they are literally asking like, hey, you just said that temple is going to be destroyed. They're literally asking, when is that going to happen? You say you're going to come back. They're not thinking about him dying and coming back, because if he hasn't died yet, they're not thinking about his second coming. They are literally just asking, when are you going back to the temple? And how are you going to build it back up? And you say, oh, that's going to be the sign. Well, what is the sign?
I mean, don't they even go, where are you going? And can we go with you?
Right. And so they are asking
right now.
that question, and then Jesus does what he does a lot of times and doesn't answer it immediately how they think, but he gives the deep answer of, hey, you're going to understand this more later after I actually die on the cross. And he applies it to his second coming of Christ. And he goes through and he answers that. He gives out the list of the different things that's going to have to take place before he comes back a second time. He gives a parable that tells them to be watchful. And then he tells them the parable of the 10 virgins, which says, hey, be prepared.
Be ready.
And then he gets to this parable of the talents. And the reason all of that is important, because when we get to the parable of the talents, he is literally asking them, how are you being productive with what I have given you?
How are you managing the kingdom while I'm gone?
I'm leaving you for a little while. Disciples, and again, he's talking to the disciples here. I've entrusted these things to you. What are you doing with it? And so the part that we really didn't have time to dive into there, and again, a lot of times we just summarize this just as money, but again, he is referring to our finances. Like, that kind of symbolizes the rest of our life. Are you trusting the Lord with your finances? And the talents that he uses, some translations just use bags of gold. The literal amount of money that this person who's going on a journey, the story he's telling, that he trusts with these 3 servants. The first one, he trusts 5 talents to. The next one, he trusts 2. The third one, he trusts 1. 1 talent equals 20 years' wages, is what we know. In today's terms, if you just take an average salary between 50 to 60,000 a year, that comes out to $1 million to $1.2 million per talent.
Yeah.
And so even the third servant who received 1 talent, it was the guy handing him $1 million.
$1 million is a lot of money.
And the dude went and hid it and dug it and
Did
just put
nothing
it in the
with
ground.
it. Yeah.
And the second person, the second talent, the guy that received 2 talents, that would equal out to, if you do the math, $2 million to $2.4 million. And the guy that received 5, that came out to $5 to $6 million. He then says, hey, then I come back, check in on him, how they did. Guy with 5, he's a good steward. He doubles it. Now I'm having $10 to $12 million. The guy with 2 now has $4 to $5 million. But the guy with 1 just brings back with what he has. And so the whole question, and now we can compare the parable of the talents to the parable of the minas. Like, what are the different things that is taking place, that is going on? 1 mina is about 3 months' wages. And so the story is just a little bit different. And so the question becomes, is this the same story that Jesus was sharing? Or did he tell this on multiple occasions? And I would fall upon the understanding he told this story in multiple occasions.
I would say both, because like we know with the Sermon on the Mount, sometimes we think, well, Jesus just gave this one Sermon on the Mount, but probably he did kind of like what a politician would do today, where they go town to town, they give the same message.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very possible that Jesus probably preached the same messages over and over again to different audiences. And so I think it's very possible, if not probable, that
there's a similar sermon in Luke to the Sermon on the Mount. They call it the Sermon on the Plain.
Yeah,
so
but it's the same,
it's very similar,
very almost
information,
the same. And so,
Yeah.
I think that would be probable that that's the case here.
Yeah, and so in Luke, when he tells it, he's actually just now making his way to Jerusalem. And the difference is, in Luke, he is telling it to a crowd of people. Whereas in Matthew, he is telling it to just privately to his disciples. So in one, you have publicly to a crowd. The other one, we have privately to just his disciples. Now, when we get into the differences, the nuances of what impact was he saying, in Luke, the actual thing he was trying to get to them is this: hey, all of you have been given an equal opportunity with the gospel. What are you doing with it?
And something of great value.
And is of great value.
Yeah.
With the disciples, with the parable of the talents, he's talking about personal responsibility. The total is different. Like, I don't get to control what you have. I don't get to control what Roger has. All I know is the Lord has trusted this to me. What am I doing with these talents? I'm responsible. It got to report back to the Lord with what he has trusted me, not with what he trusted you and Roger, but what he trusted Luke. Am I being a good steward to what he has entrusted me? And that's where it goes deeper than just money. Yes, money is part of it, but he is talking about more than that. He's talking about, what are you doing with your money and resources? Talent equals talents. What are you doing with your talents, your gifts, your abilities? And then what are you doing with your gift of salvation? I've given you this new life. You're born again. What are you doing with those things to build the kingdom of heaven? And so how do we store up our treasures in the kingdom of heaven becomes a question. And there's only one answer to that. It is, how many lost people, or how many people are you pouring into when it comes to faith?
Yeah, I can even take it a little step further than that in regards to your talents. What are you doing with your talents that is helping the kingdom, as in the body of Christ? Correct. Because obviously evangelism, I believe, is truly a gift. We see people within our congregation that absolutely have the gift of evangelism, and it's almost like they were born to evangelize. Where some, it's just like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Yep. I would say at a bare minimum, we all need to be ready and able to tell our testimony, which is sharing the gospel, in a sense, of how I was before Christ, how I became to know Christ, and how it has changed my life. That is speaking into somebody about something special that has happened to me, and that you're sharing the gospel in a sense, because it should be a reflection of Jesus' story. But then how does that apply to the body of Christ? Are you using the talents Christ gave you for the functioning of the church, so that the church can even go out and be that representative of Christ out in your community, in your Jerusalem, where you're going, Samaria, Judea, into the earth? So I do see it as beyond just how are you sharing the gospel. It's just also with how are you being a part of the body of Christ. Are you?
And that's where I
very
think
capable
we
member.
think of talent, and I think a lot of people, when you hear that, if I ask you, are you talented, you're going to think in the context of artistic, musical, stuff like that, intelligence. And yet, when I think of the talents being used in our church, like I think of a Michelle Armstrong, who is one of our door greeters. She has a talent that every time I see Michelle Armstrong, I don't care the bad morning I'm having, the bad hair day I'm having, if my beard is a mess.
Let me guess. Good morning, brother.
Yeah, and I just immediately, and I'm just like, you know what? Everything's going to be okay because our door greeter over here, immediately, that is a talent. That is a gift. That is something that a lot of people cannot do. And so we're not just talking about, hey, are you using your talent of singing? Are you using your talent of painting or preaching or, some of those more public talents. To me, a talent can simply be, hey, are you able to embrace someone who needs to be embraced on any given morning?
But I'll even say that talent of can you sing? I think of a Hannah Lehman and how she has she is gifted with so many musical talents. She can play the piano, the guitar, the bass, and sing. But yet she chooses to do that for worship and to lead people in worship instead of going. She could be doing that in a bar.
Go make an album. Or
on her own, for her own gain.
Yeah.
But she chooses to use those to lead people within the congregation to worship.
But I think Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. How many people in our church, and let's just look at the grand church, how many people in church have something that God is just waiting for them to just bust out of the seams and say, hey, here's what I want you to do with this. And they're like, yeah, that's not really my comfort zone. Or, I'm not really ready to do that. And so I do think when our church, when they hear this parable, I hope that they hear like, hey, am I hiding my city on a hill? Am I hiding it under, or am I actually willing to
covering up a lamp?
Covering up the lamp, or am I actually saying, hey, I have the light of the world that lives with me every single day. I'm going to use that to tell as many people as I can, or proclaim to as many people as I can that Jesus is Lord.
Yeah, and I would say, like I was talking about building the kingdom of heaven. All of those things you just said, in a way, they are building the kingdom of heaven.
Absolutely.
And so, it may not be directly sharing the gospel, helping lead somebody to Christ. Yes, that's the end goal. It may just be you're using it and investing it back to the kingdom of heaven in some way.
Yeah.
Like you're representing Christ in that manner.
Yeah, because you look at it from that broad picture of what Jesus talked about of go and love others like I loved you. By this, they will know you're my disciples. There's an action that takes place of just how you live and how you treat people. It's nothing you said. It's just who you are and how you treat people. To then you add in all the different gifts and then the ways, the gifts of the Spirit and then all these different things. It's kind of like this collection of stuff. And at a bare minimum, you need to know how to tell your story or have that gift of evangelism where you're hitting the streets just like a Danny Gibbs does.
So but you guys are hitting it right on because the very next parable thing he says in here is the parable of the sheep and the goats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he's separating. Sheep are on one side, the goats are on the other. How are you one of the followers of Christ? He's actually probably answering the question of like, okay, what are these things that I can invest in the kingdom of heaven? He says, hey, when I was hungry, you fed me.
Yeah.
When I was in prison, you came and visited me.
Yep.
And he answers that in the very next line. And so it's those little things that you guys are talking about, not hiding that, being bold and representing it. And so, which brings me to one of my favorite lines in Scripture where he calls the servant that did hide their lamp, that hid the thing, you wicked and lazy servant.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the dagger between the eyes of this parable, whether you are an unbeliever or believer, especially for those church-going believers, it should hit you right between the eyes of am I being lazy? Jesus has given me this free gift of salvation. What am I doing? He's trusted it to me and I'm still on earth. What am I doing with it? Am I being lazy with it? Or am I being good and faithful with it?
And if you're lazy, you're wicked.
Yeah. And you know what else I get from this is, Jesus was really intolerant because this is when we talk about, Jesus being this tolerant, he's spewing some intolerance right now. He's saying, I will not tolerate. If you proclaim my name, if you say, Lord, Lord, and yet you're just going to sit on the sidelines and you're going to be a spectator when there is spiritual warfare going on, he said, you're wicked.
I don't know you.
Yeah. And so I think that this kind of flies in the face of kind of this 21st century Jesus that just ran around and he just kind of, condoned everything and, hey, love is love. And yet Jesus here says, hey, no, I will not tolerate that.
And so comes down to, are you being faithful with what God has given you? Money and resources, your talents, your abilities, but also your gift of salvation. Are you being faithful with that while we are still on heaven? Because one day we get back to heaven, what are you going to bring back to him? Are you going to be able to say, like, all I got is what you've given me? Or are you going to be able to say, I did the best I could with what you've given me? And obviously the only way we get to heaven is by his grace and through his work of Jesus Christ. But there does seem to be some sort of honor ascribed with being faithful with what he has given us
Yeah,
here
and
on
I
earth.
think the question I always ask, I've done this in a sermon many times, but if you had the cure to cancer and your worst enemy, the one person in this world that just you don't like, and they have cancer and you have the cure to cancer, would you give it to them? 99% of people would say, yeah, like even if they're my enemy, I would give them the cure to cancer. Well, we have something greater than the cure to cancer. We have the cure to death. How many Christians are just sitting and saying, you know what, this is for me. This cure to death, I get to experience this. And so it's like, why is Jesus getting so fired up about this? Well, why wouldn't he get fired up about this? I mean, this really is the tension that Jesus was facing.
Well, then you said if you get to heaven and you've not done anything with it, it also goes on, don't argue. Then the servant argued with the master and tried to turn the tables and claim that, well, you're a difficult master and that you're hard to please. And I think it doesn't even say you didn't sow these seeds.
Yeah.
And ouch.
I genuinely think like that third category is somebody that truly hasn't received salvation.
Right.
Like they have been given, they know about Jesus, they know about God, they know about his grace, but they have not truly received in that gift and opened up.
They
that
know
box.
about Jesus. They don't know Jesus.
So that's where it lands on. They are an associate of the kingdom, but they are not part of the kingdom. And that's the scary part is how many people are going to church right now that they may be an associate to the kingdom because they know about God, they believe in Jesus, they know about his grace, but they're simply associate because they haven't truly received that gift.
Yeah, and they're misguided in understanding of why they're coming to church. That's what makes them a good Christian, is I go to church. And they check a box.
But they settle for Christian, and it's funny you said associate of the kingdom. The definition of Christian for the first 2 centuries was an associate of Jesus. It wasn't a follower, it was an associate. And I think that there's a lot of church people that go back to this idea of, oh, well, I'm an associate of Jesus. And it's like, I want to be more than an associate. I don't want to just associate with him.
But I'm even reflecting that to the church. They show up on Sunday, they listen.
They receive.
They don't really do anything with it throughout the rest of the week. And that's it.
Scary,
They're associated to FBC or a church. They claim to be a member of it, but then they don't do anything.
The ecclesiological buffet of what can I get off of this buffet?
Are you serving within the church? No. Do you go on a mission? No. Are you part of a ministry? No. Wait, why are you coming then? You know?
And Jesus, I love it because he gets straight to it. He says, why aren't you doing anything?
Yeah.
And then here's the bottom line. You're lazy.
Yeah.
You may
wicked.
And wicked. You may think, because what he did was so good. Like in his gift of salvation and what he did dying on the cross. And if that doesn't change your life, if that doesn't move you in a certain way, that is wicked.
But in the next parable, he uses sheep and goats that were 98%, their DNA, they were almost identical, almost by the untrained eye. There were people, you would have thought a goat and a sheep were the same. But when you really went into it, they were extremely different. And I think today, the reason Jesus uses sheep and goats is to the untrained eye, we're dealing with the same.
Yeah.
We're dealing with external things. But then when you actually go into it and you look at the heart and you realize, oh my goodness, there are sheep and then there are goats.
And you mentioned, though, we hide those things for so many reasons. It can be people saying, I'm not good enough, or that's outside my comfort zone. Or they talk about, I have this long line of sin that I have that's going to disqualify me from being that type of person.
Or the number one excuse, I'm too busy.
I'm too busy.
Yeah.
And Satan, literally, his number one tactic is just to get us to do nothing.
Yeah.
Like if he can get us to do nothing, whatever that reason may be, then he's done his job.
Be complacent.
And you kind of wonder if that's what Jesus means by you wicked servant, is because you allowed Satan to deceive you into one doing nothing or not believing in the truth of what Christ has done for you, and you allowed I'm not good enough to overtake your mind, when instead, no, I am good enough. I have the power of the resurrection that brought Jesus back to life and living inside of me to go and do all kinds of things. I just need to ask the Holy Spirit for help. But no, they chose to give into these anxieties or fears or all these things that the devil placed in their brain. that made them
The
become liquid.
last thing I'll say on this, when in seminary, I remember I had a professor say, he told us in the very beginning, first week of class, he said, hey, future pastors, current pastors, be prepared in your church. 98% of the work will be done by 2% of the people.
Yeah.
And I just remember
or
him,
the 80-20 rule.
yeah, I remember hearing that.
And that's even good.
And like being heartbroken and thinking, I don't know what's worse, that it's the 2% or that it's 98% of the work, and it's really just a mixture of that. And like if you're a Christian and you hear that, and that doesn't just make you say, you know what, it's time that we start applying this parable in my life. And what is my excuse of not being able to get up and say, hey, for this week, for this morning, you know what, God, you gave me some talents. I'm not entitled to them. I'm going to use them for your good.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the main message.
And that's what I think the parable is getting to, is all about faithfulness. But I even asked the question at the beginning, because the dichotomy of, well, doesn't that become work-based then? I thought the only way we get to heaven is by God's grace. See, grace in this concept, it is not work-based. There's nothing you can do to earn your way. But just because it's not work-based doesn't mean it's not effort-based. And so even though we have God's grace, it should change our effort and what we apply to bring.
Do you have to take Emily out on a date every once in a while to keep your marriage going?
I don't have to.
But what I'm saying is that, yeah, I mean, for me,
But
like,
I put in the effort.
Caitlin and I, we find date nights. Like, we
Yeah.
find, hey, I'm taking this day out. Does that mean my marriage is works-based? Of course not.
No.
And I think
But
that
why
it's
do you do it?
I do it because I get to do it, but also because I care for her so much that I'm willing to do that because I know that through that, the fruit will come from that.
You do it out of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
And same thing, out of returned love for what Christ has done for us, you want to then go and outpour the same kind of love, grace, and mercy that was given
Absolutely.
to you.
And that's what he's getting at in this parable, is this grace that we have received as a gift. It's not based upon their works, because the person with 5 and the person with 2, they received the same reward. What he's getting at is it's their effort. The only mistake the person with 1 did is that he did nothing. He had 0 effort. And Joby Martin, he said, grace that doesn't change you doesn't save you. And I think that's a good way of summarizing this parable.
I mean, in first century language, you could put that as by their fruits you will know them. I mean, that's what Jesus says.
So here's how I'll close it, is talking to the Christians that are listening to this, is the number one way we can figure it out is, number one, you have to identify what has the Lord given you. What is the gift he has given you? So identify what is the money that he has given you in resources, and what are you doing with it? Is it just for you, or is you investing it back to the kingdom of heaven? What about your talents and your abilities? What talents and abilities has he given to you, and what are you doing with them? And then finally, your gift of salvation, reflect on that, and what are you doing with that gift? And so, number one, you have to identify, and then number 2, there might be some of those areas that you are really good at, but what are the areas you are being lazy with? And so, don't evaluate your entire gifts that he has given. Is there certain areas that you are really good at and that you're being faithful in? Which areas are you being more lazy in? And then now go and change that, and it'll make
Pray
you more
about
productive.
it. Take those and start praying about it. Is this where we do a shameless plug for Growth Track?
Got
to
to.
take your spiritual gifts test
I would be
to
offended
find
if we
out
didn't.
Yeah.
Well, let's let.
Yeah, go ahead and take it away. This would be a
Oh.
good transition. Yeah.
to what? To Growth Track?
Yeah.
Well, hey, and now for a quick
And by the
commercial
way-
break. But
no, seriously, that's what
Yeah.
our Growth Track is designed to help you get started with, is learn your spiritual gifts and
You know,
to
the
find
mi-
out how you can serve in our community.
the misconception I've heard from church people that I've talked to Growth Track, they say, well, no, isn't that just for people that have just recently been
believers?
baptized? And I get to tell them, hey, we don't care how long you've been in the
Yep.
church. We will let anyone, if you've gone to this church for 50 years, we'll take you through Growth Track.
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah.
That's good. You guys ready to get to the final part of this podcast?
I thought this was it.
Nope. Talking about Halloween, baby.
Why? Why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
This is going to be fun. But what's everybody talking about? So I do have to say, I feel like the conversation is coming up every year now. Like every time Halloween
louder
comes
and
around. And I don't know if it's because of podcast or social media or what. I feel like growing up, there was never a question if we were going to celebrate Halloween or
Yeah, as a
participate
church.
in Halloween.
Yeah.
Now I feel like maybe it's just because I'm a pastor now that every year this question gets asked.
It's not
from Christians.
because you're just a pastor. I do think that this has been There has been a megaphone on this, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. There's a lot of things that have been brought up recently that need to get brought up. I don't personally think this is one of those things. I do think that that this is a topic that has been louder now. When we were kids, the only thing that I remember is like at school, they would call it a fall party. They wouldn't call it Halloween, but we would still dress. We would do everything normally, and there was I'd never remember any kids that were held from that celebration. So I don't know, today if that's necessarily the case. I remember when I came on staff, you would call it like, "Hey, we're doing the Reformation party," and I said, "Hey, if I'm on staff, we're calling it Halloween. All right, I'm sick of that word. Is not Voldemort. Okay, you're not going to combust if we say the word Halloween." So I do think that there was a little hesitance of using the word, but in terms of the dressing up, the trick or treating, I mean, that I would have never guessed that to be controversial until I entered ministry.
Yeah.
So
what's strange is the time I've been here, the conversation has shifted from in years past. It was, why aren't we doing things to celebrate Halloween as a church? To now, do you celebrate Halloween? Because if you do, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's kind of weird.
And we've gotten the question from congregants, and you don't know. They don't tell you what they believe. They just say, "Hey, what do you believe about Halloween?" And you're like, "Well, I may be giving you the right answer. I may be giving you the wrong answer." But I have had multiple conversations just in the past week on, "Hey, what is FBC stance on Halloween?" And I'm like, "I don't think that's in our Constitution."
It's now our chance to tell them.
Okay. Well, again, I should say this. The views of Roger Shear are not necessarily the views of First Baptist. I am a pastor at First Baptist.
Are you associated with First Baptist?
Yes. And so what we share, and we may not agree entirely on this, but I do think that this is an opportunity for us to just give our pastoral opinion.
I think this is a good opportunity to bring back our conversation last week where people thought we were debating about
death penalty. Yeah.
And just clear some things up that we were not debating about death penalty, but
no, you wouldn't want to debate with me. And
yeah, because I feel like the general consensus is that I won that debate.
Yeah, exactly. The general consensus, which was your Bev Thompson. I'm guessing
my grandma was a big supporter.
Grandma, mom. Yeah. Sharon Winfrey agreed
what
that
about
you won.
Emily?
Yeah,
Did she even care?
She was still on the fence. No, I'm just kidding. No, but like just to say, like we were not going at that to say you are right, I am wrong, or I am right and you are wrong. It was to have that open dialogue of like, hey, we may disagree on an issue like this, but yet we still love each other.
Yeah.
And we can still go to the same church and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And there's certain topics that are so incredibly nuanced, right?
Yeah.
So incredibly subjective. And no, I mean, I think and I listened to it on the way back from Kansas City this morning, actually. I re-listened to it. And even the way we ended it was I was like, no, I can see that. And then you conceded like, yeah, I can see that as well. So like, that's the way we're supposed to have conversations as Christians.
Yeah. And not to mention it's a topic that doesn't matter about salvation.
No, it's secondary. Yeah,
it's very secondary.
Yeah. So,
well, let's talk about Halloween now. And so as we are getting into this conversation, I think it's important to open up the dialogue with talking about the history.
Yeah.
And so how did we even get to where we are at? So
Roger, this is a very hot topic.
Yeah,
for you.
and this can be clipped. And I told Caitlin this morning.
As in to shorten it, or
well, no, it can be. There can be parts of it that are clipped with any podcast you do, which can sometimes be the problem of long form dialogue. Is that people take it out of context. But I told Caitlin on the way here. I said this might be the most controversial. I mean, we've had a podcast now for 3-4 episodes. We've already talked about Netflix. We talked about abortion, capital punishment. We've touched a little bit on immigration. We've talked about Israel, and now we're talking about Halloween. Guys, I don't know what else we can actually talk about that's controversial at this point, but this might be the most controversial.
I don't know. You could go LeBron, Jordan, maybe.
That's right.
People going.
People still believe, old codgers still believe that Jordan's better than LeBron, which is crazy. And so I know. Listen, why do I do this to myself? Here's the history about Halloween, which is a very beautiful tradition, right? And I understand the response is going to be, okay, well, we're not talking about 8th century. We're talking about 21st century. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah. But just looking at, in Rome, what All Saints' Day was, which was November 1st. All Hallows' Eve was the evening before All Saints' Day.
October 31st.
That's right. And Pope Gregory III, who was the Pope at the time, was the one that made it an official celebration in which, the Catholics would honor this day, and that it was a day to pray, but specifically to honor saints from the past. And so the origin of it, and as distorted as that may have been over the years with different humanistic things, the origin of it was a distinctly Christian celebration. And so from there, we had, different themes. And people say, well, what about trick-or-treating? Well, trick-or-treating even comes from All Hallows Eve. And so the history of that was back then you would go door to door, and it was called souling, S-O-U-L-I-N-G, souling, where you would go door to door, and instead of candy, you would give prayer. And there were certain countries, certain parts of the world that would celebrate this, and it was especially the women and the children that were poor, oftentimes impoverished, and they would go to a door, they would pray, and then in response, the household would then give them what were called soul cakes. They would give them, there would be some type of food in response to the prayer. And even today in Portugal, modern day Portugal, they do this. It is called souling. You can look it up. You can research it. All of that comes back from the 8th century of Halloween, All Hallows Eve, leading in to All Saints Day. And so that is kind of the Christian history. Their pagan roots have hopped on along the years, as they typically do. But when we look at Christmas comes from the pagan celebration Yule, the American Christian. We're not talking Jesus' birthday because, hey, guess what, guys? Sorry, he wasn't born on December 25th, right? So you look at Yule and things as harmless as mistletoe. They have pagan roots, right? In Yule, the celebration, which today there are pagans in the United States that celebrate Yule, which is a celebration to pagan gods. Not Christianity, but Christmas branched off of this celebration of Yule. And I mean, we can go into the pagan roots and how we celebrate Easter and all of these different things. And so the point of that being is like all of these, there's a beautiful origin. There's a beautiful genesis of, okay, this is why we celebrate this. This is why we do this. And then from there, man adds things that don't necessarily speak for the celebration itself. And so that is kind of the history of it. Now, of course, the devil's advocate, you can respond and say, well, Roger, nobody's going door to door in America to pray. Like, I mean, in the context of Halloween.
There may have been a day they did, though.
And there was.
Yeah.
And so it's important that I think historical context is always important, whether you agree with something, whether you disagree with something. I think we all need to be able to articulate, okay, why did this even show up in the first place? And in this example, I think it's a beautiful thing that occurred in the 8th century on. But that, again, we're not going into some of the other human
All
additions.
Hallows Eve, but it even started a little bit before that.
Yeah,
Speaking of basketball, the greatest of all time, Larry Bird,
Yep.
played for the Celtics.
Yeah.
Larry Bird.
Celtic tradition of around the 6th century. So I went and dug in a little bit to prepare for this.
And we haven't gotten to talk.
No,
share notes. Okay.
No. So I was trying to just get ready to see, because I know you've talked about this a lot and the All Saints Day and the origin of it. So I went and dug around. Found that in about the 6th century, so a few hundred years prior to the All Saints Day of November 1st and Hallows Eve of October 31st, in Ireland, Celt tradition was that they would dress up in costumes, put on animal skins and animal heads, and they would bring their fall type offering and present it to their gods, so pagan gods. But then these costumes would also protect them from spirits. So to me, that's always strange. When you're giving offerings to a pagan god and then you're scared of evil spirits, I think those are one and the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Seems odd to me.
You're giving
knowing something now that they didn't understand.
You're giving an offering to the thing that you also need protected from.
Yes. Yeah. It seemed kind of strange. But it started where it was in a May time frame, and it was in response to this Roman emperor god worship that then shifted to October, late October, around the 31st. And whether this All Saints Day was in response to that a couple hundred years later or not, there's kind of a coincidence to that, but could easily be made an argument that that was probably a response to this Celtic tradition that was worshiping pagan gods. So, in a sense, was that the origin of Halloween, or was the response of All Saints Day really what Halloween came from? But then obviously over the years, everything seems to get perverted or just taken over, and it just gets ruined.
Well, I think that's one of my favorite is Titus chapter 1. I think it's verse 15 where it says, all things are to the pure, all things are pure, but to the corrupt, all things are impure. And so, like, if you are pure, what comes out of purity will be, logically speaking, purity. If there are pure intentions and you have a pure heart, but if you are corrupt and you are viewing this as an opportunity to to be corrupt and to do something for impure reasons, then of course we're going to have issues with that. But that's true for, when we talk about Christmas, I'm a Christian. I celebrate Christmas. Why do I celebrate Christmas? Well, because Jesus died and rose again. Statistically, 80% or 86% of Americans celebrate Christmas, which means that we're not just talking about Christians, right? There are different non-Orthodox Christian churches that celebrate Christmas. And they believe some things, some warped things about Jesus. They believe some warped things about the Bible. So you can just as easily say, well, hey, these knockoff Christians over here are celebrating Christmas, therefore Christmas is bad. And I would say, is that an indictment on Christmas, or is that an indictment on the people that are potentially misusing or misinterpreting what Christmas actually is?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's where, because a response I hear all the time is, well, there's people that have satanic roots and they view Halloween as this, and this. Well, I know single people on Valentine's Day that use that as an opportunity to go to the strip club. Like, that's their annual strip club trip. Does that mean that Valentine's Day is inherently, lustful? No. For me, Valentine's Day is a very beautiful day that I get to celebrate my spouse, and
you should be doing that 365 days.
You should, but Valentine's Day, and I know some people are. I'm going to probably trigger someone because they're going to say, oh, we hate Valentine's Day too. But the point of it is like, I know many couples that use Valentine's Day as a very beautiful thing. Yeah. I also know people that use Valentine's Day as an opportunity to go and sin. Yeah. The indictment is on the individual. The indictment is on the heart posture, which says very little about the day or the quote unquote celebration. And I think that that's where we go back to the heart posture.
Yeah. You don't need a Hallmark holiday to tell somebody you love them. You should do that 365 days out of the year. I do kind of wonder though, if Jesus looks down, he says, they're celebrating my birthday in a way that's not even celebrating me, and it's not even on my birthday. What is going on?
But he's like, okay,
it does get pretty messed
up. But then
up.
He's like, okay, Christmas is a wash, but at least, hopefully they'll get the picture by Easter. And then he gets to Easter, and he looks down and he says,
it gets worse.
Oh, he's like, okay, well now we've got this giant bunny that's pooping out eggs. Yeah, it's like, well, I'm going to have a conversation with them when they get to the pearly gates, right? And that's like all of those, even going back to the mistletoe, which is harmless. If I see a couple kissing under a mistletoe, I'm not immediately thinking, oh no, paganism, oh no, because it's a pure act, right? And just as it says in Titus chapter 1, with the pure, purity comes. And so that's where is the heart in that situation. Now, you can say, well, there's people that use Halloween to do things that are demon-based or blah, blah, blah.
And that's where it gets hijacked.
You're absolutely correct. There are people that do that. And we should condemn that, but we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater per se, because I do believe there are families that are Christian, very, very devout disciples of the Lord, that use Halloween as a wholesome environment. I saw somebody post on Facebook today, and I commented on it. It said, it was a meme, and it said, if Jesus saw Christians doing trunk or treat events, he would probably flip some tables. And
flip some trunks.
Flip some tables, or trunks. And the person that posted it said, do you agree with this? And I commented, I put equal parts hilarious and false, because I don't believe, because I see churches doing trunk or treat, and then I see people that go to trunk or treat and then go back to that church on Sunday. I've seen that, okay? So a pure, wholesome thing, right, that can be used for good. And I don't want to give Satan all the credit and just say, oh, him and his minions, they're taking over everything. And to me, I don't think that has to be the case, because if your posture of the heart is in the right place, then Satan's not getting the credit in that situation.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, even Jesus, why did he flip the tables in the temple? Because of the heart posture of why they were having those tables.
They were misusing and abusing.
They were using his temple as a profit center.
Exactly. And
as a flea market.
So it was their heart posture behind.
Yes.
Like, was he upset people were selling animals that would be performed for sacrifices? Overall, did he have a problem with that? I don't think so. But turning the temple into an area where they could make money and it was all about the profit, that heart posture behind it, that is what they were having.
And what's funny is that the same people, though, when they saw him heal the shriveled man, they said, well, hold on a second. It was their standard of what was going on. And Jesus said, hey, no, my posture is right, because what I am doing is I see a man who is in need, and I am helping this man in need. And regardless of the Sabbath and all of that. And so Jesus very much was about the heart.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. As a church, we are going to be downtown. and
Yep.
have our cars set up.
Yep.
And we're going to participate in the trunk or treat going on downtown.
It's a great missional opportunity.
We're going to be handing out candy and inviting people to our courtyard and kids ministry.
And children's church on Sunday morning that's designed for kids.
Yes.
And you can sit here, and I've read all the Facebook comments of, well, do you know the history of carving pumpkins when you let your kids carve pumpkins? Hey, do you know the history of mistletoes? Do you know the history of Kris Kringle? Do you know the history of...
Save it for Christmas podcast.
Yeah, that's right. But insert any wholesome thing that at some point probably has some bad roots. And my point being is, as a family, if you go trick-or-treating and use that as an opportunity for your family, if you go to a trunk or treat and use that as an opportunity to maybe tell somebody about Jesus, who knows what conversation, because I looked at the trunk or treat that was going on Saturday at the Civic Center, and I saw so many different families from so many different walks of life, and I just thought, man, how many churches are at this thing right now and they're telling people about Jesus? Because if so, you've got a whole pond of people, but then I think that there's some other churches that say, no, we're not going to go to that because of X, Y, and Z. And meanwhile, there's a pond of people that they're never going to fish out of because of our own humanistic preconceived notions.
So why is that? Why are churches not? And do you think it's because people, Satan, like satanic people, have claimed Halloween as their day?
Yeah.
Like that is their
Certain-
day.
There's been some.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of memes, and again, I mean, this is just a side point, but most Satanism, and I'm saying like I think 99% of Satanism comes from Anton LaVeyan Satanism, who was an atheist.
Yeah.
He did not believe in a literal Satan. I've shared
Satanism is about self.
I've shared the gospel
Yeah.
with Satanists. I've talked to Satanists. I've never met a Satanist who actually worshipped a literal Satan. Not saying that there aren't theistic Satanists out there, but I think it's important to note that most of the people that say, hey, on Halloween, as a Satanist, are we talking about just an atheist that's about the self, the philosophy of Satan? Or are we talking about literal Satan worshiping? Be that as it may,
There is that goes on.
that does exist. It does exist.
Yeah.
And again, there's no debate here, right? I mean, there's no conversation of, and even if a family came to me and said, hey, for a sleepover, my son and his friends are they're messing with a Ouija board because it's Halloween. My response is, hey,
Quit.
get that out of there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that nothing good could come from
No.
that, right?
Bad.
So please don't hear this and think that I'm saying or that we're saying, oh, just live as the world is living.
But I'd even go a little step further, and as more seems less harmful, is if we drove up to your house and you have grave stones in your yard and you got ghosts hanging from your tree and you got these spirity looking things flying, and you're hanging from your trees, you might have gone a little far with the death part of it.
I almost don't want to say this because it's locally. Okay, I was driving by. There is a house where literally they have a scarecrow in the front yard that's holding a knife and it's bloody, and I'm just like, maybe that's not the wholesomeness. That
there is literally it has to be 15 feet tall skeleton in
That's just
someone's
scary.
yard in our neighborhood. You're like, wow,
Yeah.
you actually paid money for that.
yeah. So again, it's a heart posture.
I do think that's the concern of a lot of churches, and people are saying like, hey, it is opening up the door for people on those days to feel like, hey, witches, witchcraft, Ouija boards, darkness, a lot of that, you're opening the door to a lot of it.
Well,
And
witchcraft, Ouija boards, absolutely. Now, putting some silly things in your yard or going trick-or-treating.
Bobbing for apples,
Yeah.
dressing up as Olaf.
But if you're celebrating death in your front yard, I don't know if I'd quite recommend that because the devil does needle his way in slowly. But yeah, sorry.
And that's where I think other churches also would say like, hey, the reason Christians shouldn't is because that's how the world views that day. And so you're not distinguishing yourself from the world in those days. And so like you're becoming one.
And we are to be separate from the world, but we're also, in a way, we got to blend a little bit. When to the Jews, we've got to become like Jews. To those under the law, we have to become like those under the law.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we sin with those under the law, but it means that sometimes there are opportunities that we see. And again, I just think of those trunk or treat events in the Civic Center where you can't park within a half mile because 40% of our families are in one event. And I'm thinking, man, how many unsaved people could potentially be reached in an environment like that?
Yeah. And so I think to like bring this full circle, number one, it always comes back to matter anything, but especially Halloween, but really anything we do, it comes back to your heart posture. Why are you doing it? Is it to worship death?
I hope
on
not.
Halloween, you probably shouldn't do it. Is it for the opportunity to do Ouija boards? Then you definitely shouldn't do it. Like, are you worshiping something satanic? You shouldn't do it. Like, if that is your heart posture, then you shouldn't do it. But if your heart posture is, you know what, my kid wants to dress up as a Major League Baseball player and go downtown and go trunk to trunk and get candy,
Get a year's worth of chocolate.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
And I think that we can look at history. I love history. It's why I went back and looked at the history to show that, hey, not all of this is demon worshiping and Satan peddling and all of that. But I do think that, yes, there are times where something can have something bad historically, and yet we can still use it. For example, I mean, we people in our church that drive Volkswagens.
What's wrong with that?
You'll never guess who founded the Volkswagen.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what? Let's just take that same group of people. What about the Autobahn, which is where Eisenhower got the interstate system from? Mm-hmm. So again,
everything has roots.
Everything has roots, and in that case, if you drive a Volkswagen, you're not a Nazi.
Do you drive a Mitsubishi?
I don't know the history of Mitsubishi. I drive a Dodge.
Yeah, they made the engines in the airplanes that in the
World
Japanese.
War II?
Yeah,
there you go. See, but I think that's why. As parents, and I think that this will be the last thing I say, because if you are a parent,
as far as I understand it,
I firmly believe,
disclaimer.
I actually think I have heard that. But I think as parents, I believe in personal conviction. I believe in personal discernment. And so if a family comes to me, and I've already talked to a few people that go to church here, I love them to death, and their decision as a family is, hey, we're not going to celebrate that for this, this, and this. Yeah. I have nothing but respect for that, right? Yeah. And so I think it's important that parents make biblical, wholesome decisions for their family. That and I will never disagree with the conviction of a parent in that situation.
So my first point was heart posture.
Yeah,
like our heart posture, whatever that is important. So why are you doing what you are doing? I don't think if your kid's just dressing up as a Major League Baseball player is any different than them showing up in a jersey for Jersey Day at school. Like what's different from him showing up for Jersey Day in May compared to Halloween in October? Really nothing.
Or a themed birthday party.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the second point I was going to make was conviction. The Lord has given us, all believers, the gift of the Holy Spirit for a reason. If you have a personal conviction, that doesn't mean you should force your personal conviction upon somebody else who doesn't have that same conviction. But yet, I should still, like you just said, respect your conviction.
Because Paul says, whether it's a sin or not, if you think it's a sin, it's a sin, right? Mm-hmm. Because when people come up to us and they say, hey, Pastor, is this action a sin? And my answer is always the same. The fact that you have to ask the question probably tells me that for you it might be a sin. Yeah. And so if someone is like, well, is Halloween a sin? Is Halloween a sin? Because they want to use that as an opportunity for, there's a chance that it very well could be sinful, but going back to the heart posture.
Yep.
I'm surprised it's just not a conspiracy theory that dentists started. The dentist, people that fix your teeth.
Because they just want everyone to eat candy. Yeah. But they've also taken over Easter candy, Christmas.
See, there you go.
As Americans, every Halloween, every holiday we have, it includes candy in some way. Or eating, because what else do we love
It's
to
a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Dentists have caused this. They just want more business.
You've heard it here first.
Yeah. So conviction number 2, I think, is a big thing. And then number 3, my encouragement, again, with anything, is always protect. Like you were just saying, if you have to question it, protect yourself. I think it is important that you should protect your household. You should protect your kids. You should protect your family of not letting anything demonic in, because there is demons out there. You have to protect what you're allowing into your household, whether that's through screens, the way we're dressing up, and what we are doing. So we're not saying this like, hey, go willy-nilly and celebrate Halloween however you want to. No, we are saying there is a way you can do it, where it's just genuinely you're just walking around and getting candy, but yet I think you still should protect what is coming in to your kids' life.
Yeah, and a final observation I will make is, I see people that this time of year, Christian friends that I love to death, and they believe what they believe on secondary issues, but when the month of October, this is all they post about. And their news feed ceases becoming about Jesus, and it's Satan, demon, Satan, Satan, demons, demon, Satan, demons, and it all pertains back to Halloween. And yes, like those are important things that we need to call out. But I say this all the time, and I mean it. I don't want to give Satan more credit than he's
Yeah.
already taking in our world.
But
And
I
it's
think
easy.
social media obviously fuels that. You watch Instagram and you see that guy that's a former Satanist and he's claiming, "Oh yeah, this is exactly it's our holiday and we love this day and this was our chance." And
But even if you take away social media, I think that there are probably pastors in our country. I know I've heard a couple of sermons from pastors that aren't from here, and they gave a 45, 50-minute message on Halloween, and like I think it was like the 39-minute mark. Jesus is finally, and it's like, okay, finally we're getting back to like a gospel portion here instead of just, hey, Satan is running amok on Halloween and we need to be afraid and we need to get in our bubbles and lock our front doors and turn our lights on and stare at the light for 12 hours. And I'm like,
newsflash, Satan's running amok 365 days out of
yes,
the year.
and it's like that's where I'm just like, hey, we give Satan enough credit for what he does. I don't want him to just everything just be, oh well that's satanic and therefore we're just going to shut ourselves off from the world. No, I don't think that that's the appropriate answer. So that's my spiel. That's my argument. I know a lot of Christians vehemently disagree with that. I respect that. I'm always willing to have that conversation, but that's just my personal opinion on it.
Yeah.
So we'll be set up at the downtown, handing out candy and
Yep.
inviting people to church, trying to push back darkness in that direction. I'm going to be celebrating Halloween or participating in Halloween by dressing in camo and climbing up a tree and trick-or-treating in the deer woods.
As the Grim Reaper in camo.
I don't know about the Grim Reaper,
Oh,
but
okay,
just
good.
like wearing camo and
And-
climbing up a tree, and
But
that's
you
where I'm
have a
going.
And
gun to kill.
here's my last thing I'll say to tick people off. I don't know Caitlin's work schedule yet for the evening. I need to talk with her on that. If she does not work, we will be at our house with the porch light on.
Yep.
What we've done every single year. We will be handing out candy, talking to people.
What's your address?
311 North Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
That's no.
Yeah.
But that's one of our things. She
Yeah.
invites her niece over, and it's a wholesome evening. We get to have so many conversations with people, and it's a great time.
Are you
And
dressing up?
I have in the past, but I'm not this year. No, this
Why?
year I'm because I don't want to. I'm too fat. So,
Don't say that. You're not.
well,
You can still dress up.
well, thanks, buddy. That's like why aren't you dressing up? Because I'm fat. Like, oh, buddy, that you can find things. You could be the Michelin Man. Oh, thanks, pal. Anyways.
Stay put marshmallow man.
Yeah, but
from
no, we've
Ghostbusters.
every year, Caitlin and I, since we've been together, even when we dated, we that's something that hey, from 6 to 8, let's pass out Halloween candy, right? And so I almost said 6 to 7, but I'm not falling into that trap. So
I'm pretty sure half the town comes through our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so our small group comes over, we have a fun time, and we see a ton of people
and
we
guess
know.
who gets no glory when you do that? Guess who gets no glory when Caitlin and I have handed out candy? You know who gets no glory and no credit? Satan.
Yeah.
Good.
But it's a fun time.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people you know.
And how many people you get to talk to that
Yeah.
you may never have an opportunity.
Yeah.
People are literally, we talk as Christians, I can't find anyone to share the gospel with. If only there was a day in our country where everyone goes to your door unannounced and you have an opportunity to say whatever you want to say to them because they're at your doorstep. And if you want to, you can share the gospel if you want
Absolutely.
to. Going back to souling, going back to what they would do and what they
Yep.
do today in Portugal. Hey, we're going to go door to door and pray for each other. That all goes back to what we're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good.
How about
Okay,
that?
I'm done.
That's great. Well, it's a big weekend.
So did we explain anything there?
I don't
know.
think so.
I don't think anything actually happened, but a lot of exciting things happening this weekend. Halloween. The weather's looking really good for deer hunting, so that's going to be picking up.
Could not care less.
Yeah, so
Oh, I love
the
this
deer
year.
are
Time of
chasing.
year
It's
is
great.
amazing.
And guess what, guys? Sunday,
Did he say deer chasing?
deer are chasing.
Oh.
Yeah, bucks are starting to chase does. And then Sunday is fall back.
Oh, that's right.
We turn back our clocks.
Get an extra hour.
And for all of us living in the 21st century, thank you, iPhone and Droid, that it just does it for you.
Automatically, yeah.
You just feel a little
You
more
still
tired.
get
And
an
is
extra,
this the
no,
year?
No,
you
we
get
get an
you
extra
get
hour
extra
this year.
hour.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
you
good.
fall back, you get
Yeah.
an extra hour. But is this
Man.
the year that, or is it when we have to go spring forward? Because Trump's talked about this numerous times of just getting rid of that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, it finally happened.
I agree with
support
that.
it.
Once they get the government back up and my wife can start getting a paycheck again as a federal employee, then we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good stuff.
Well, anyway, thank you for joining us for the Make Heaven Crowded podcast. Join us this Sunday as Roger's going to be diving into what parable?
We're going to do the unforgiving servant.
As we're diving into that parable. So join us on Sunday at 9 or 10:30. If you are looking and you haven't been through Grow Track, get plugged into that. You can go to teamfbc.info to find more information on that. Till then, we'll see you back here next week.